When my husband and I moved here to Louisville, we chose to live over on the south side of the city, not too far from Iroquois Park. We did this mainly to be in the same neighborhood as my mother and father-in-law. One of the extra benefits of having a home in that particular part of town is that I now live less than a mile from Kentucky Kingdom, and about a mile and a half from the Muhammad Ali International Airport. The other morning, as I merged onto the Watterson Expressway on my way here to work, one of those giant UPS planes was coming in for a landing right over the highway. It made me think, boy, it has been a very long time since I've been on an airplane. Now, this is mainly due to the pandemic. It has just seemed, safer to drive places, even if it's a distance, than to get cooped up in a crowded plane with strangers. The last time that I flew the friendly skies was actually a trip back in September of 2019 when I was coming here to Louisville from my then home in Texas to preside at my niece's wedding. That was a pretty eventful trip, come to think of it. Jim and I had arrived early for our flight from the George Bush International Airport north of Houston. It was raining when we got there, but I didn't really think much of it. That was until I looked at the news on the TV monitors in the concourse and discovered that a tropical storm named Imelda was passing across the region, and heavy rainfalls were expected that morning. As we sat in the airport and watched the rain begin to pour outside, the announcements began. First, all flights were being postponed because of flooding on the runways. Then, all current flights were being canceled. Then came the news that the entire airport had been shut down because all of the roads into and out of the terminals were now impassable and underwater. We spent that entire day trapped in the airport, not able to get another flight to Louisville and not able to go home because some parts of Houston had received almost 20 inches of rain in less than 3 hours, and the highways were shut down. Now, I think that many of us may have a story like that, right? Spending much more time in an airport somewhere than we had expected. It is not uncommon for flights to be canceled or delayed. Flying is a mode of transportation that puts us at the mercy of Mother Nature, after all. But that particular Thursday morning, back in 2019, was different than anything that I had experienced before. With the entire airport closed, no one able to fly out, no one even able to drive into the place. The usually crowded security checkpoints and concourses were eerily empty. It was kind of like a scene from The Walking Dead. I will long remember that particular day for another reason as well. In the midst of an uncontrollable and potentially hazardous situation, it was amazing to see how strangers started treating each other. I will long remember a particular young man who struck up a conversation with me and Jim as we stood in a very long line together to retrieve our baggage from the airline. This young man was trying to get back home to Mexico, to a small town outside of Mexico City, after a month-long business trip to Canada. After his third flight of the day had been canceled, he was annoyed, but was kind of just resigned to staying in Houston much longer than he had planned. He told us how anxious he was to get back home, how worried he was about his family, because their town in the state of Hidalgo was a very dangerous place to live these days, with gangs and cartels roaming the streets and random violence a part of everyday life there. We shared in his relief and his utter joy when he received a text from United saying that he was confirmed on a flight the following day back to Mexico City. I will also long remember Patty, a United Airlines employee that we met at the front of that particular line. She had been working for almost 14 hours nonstop. But she took the time to find out our names, where we were from, where we were hoping to travel to. She even went back to personally search for my luggage. She called me 2 hours later when my bags finally appeared on the conveyor. There was an incredible sense of kindness happening that day at the George Bush Airport. From the TSA agents to the Burger King cashier to the parking lot bus driver. Lots of tired, frustrated, exhausted people who somehow, miraculously, refrained from taking all of those emotions out on each other, and instead chose to come together in our shared helplessness and humanity as the deluge of a tropical storm came and went around us. These past years of public health crisis, of climate crisis, of political divisions have shown us how so often we can make the other choice. This week, as we have all felt the heartache of another horrific act of violence, and we have watched our leaders respond by arguing amongst themselves rather than taking any meaningful action, I've been thinking a lot about kindness. Kindness is one of those words that we use a lot. We think that we know what it means, but we struggle to really define it. I think that it's because kindness is emotional rather than intellectual. We know when we experience kindness. We know how it feels. We know what it looks like and sounds like. It's kind of like the way that Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart famously defined obscenity. I know it when I see it. We also know what kindness is not. When news anchors suggest that we should take baby formula away from migrant children at detention centers on our southern border so that real American children can have it. When a former president of the United States uses racial slurs and personally attacks candidates for public office who refuse to go along with his big lie. When a police officer kneels on the neck of a suspect for 8 minutes and 46 seconds while bystanders plead for him to stop. That is not kindness, right? And our gut reaction to hearing such words, to witnessing such actions, well, our reactions are often not filled with kind thoughts in return, right? Which brings up the question for me. Is kindness the highest of all virtues? Are we always supposed to try to be kind? I guess it depends on what we think kindness really is. We often imagine, right, that to be kind means to be nice, that niceness and kindness are one and the same. but I don't think that they are. Being nice means being pleasant, well-mannered, smiling, and non-confrontational. I don't think that our Unitarian Universalist principles ask us to be nice about racism or sexism, about words and actions that dehumanize people. In fact, our principles insist that we confront and call out such ways of thinking and being, and not just shrug them off with a smile. Kindness is distinct from niceness in that it requires that we move beyond simple civility, politeness, good manners, and that we seek a deeper, more emotional connection to the people around us. Patty, that woman working at the United baggage counter, that wet Thursday, I should say, at the Houston airport, she was not just being nice and using good customer service skills. In that situation, she was being kind because she clearly empathized with me and Jim and all the other people in that long line, feeling the frustration and the exhaustion with us and trying to do what she could do to help. The kindness of her words and her actions made me and others more kind, more patient in that moment, when, it was a moment when we could have all acted quite differently. In our responses to our neighbor who still denies the results of the last election, to our grandfather with his homophobic rants, to that woman in the Subaru who's texting and driving in a school zone, we don't have to always be nice. Being nice just condones bad behavior and does nothing to challenge it. We don't have to be nice, but perhaps we might try to be kind. And finding kindness means finding a way to connect with the humanity of the person behind those harmful words or irresponsible acts. There's a reading in the back of our gray UU hymnal by the great Universalist leader Kenneth Patton. Patton says this: "Let us worship the mystery and the revelation in the faces of our brothers and sisters. May we seek to understand the shyness behind arrogance, the fear behind pride, the tenderness behind clumsy strength, and the anguish behind cruelty." Patton is urging us to see that we are all capable of acting out of our pain and our fear and our anger, and that can lead us down the road to hurt and harm. If we can try to understand and to honor one another's woundedness more fully, we can find empathy, and thus kindness, even as we resist harmful and hurtful attitudes and confront those espousing them. We can also approach ourselves, I think, with a little bit more kindness when we falter and fail. Not letting ourselves off the hook or making excuses, but allowing ourselves to learn, to try to do better next time. This is the type of kindness that the Buddha discovered and taught. And it comes out of the profound recognition that the web of life that we affirm to respect and promote in our Unitarian Universalist principles is not just an imaginary intellectual construct. The web of life is the truth. It is the ultimate reality of all life. It is the truth of our connectedness. It is the root of all kindness. Our connectedness is the remedy for our abusive and divisive impulses. It is the where and the when and the how of every encounter that we have. No matter if the sun is shining or the tropical storm is plummeting on us. You know, I was at that Houston airport for about 14 hours on that fateful Thursday back in 2019. My poor niece and her fiance were a little worried if I was ever going to get to Louisville to do their wedding, but fortunately I did. I will tell you that at the end of that long day in Houston, as some of the streets finally began to clear, it was about 7 o'clock, and it was starting to get dark. And we began the long sojourn back to our car in a parking lot way outside the airport there. What is normally about a 10-minute bus ride took about 45 minutes because high water still had a lot of the roads closed. Along the way, one person on the bus kind of got a little overwhelmed and cranky and tired and impatient. One person on the bus lost his cool and responded a little badly to a question asked by the bus driver. This young woman, who had been at work way past her usual shift, just turned and said to this person, "Honey, I know it has been a long day. It has been a long day for me too. It will all be all right." Everyone on the bus did what you just did. They all laughed. And you know, it made me laugh too. Instead of returning my regretful words with her own anger, she had connected to the feelings among us and offered words of reassurance. Jim and I ended up being the next to the very last people to get off that bus. And I took a moment to apologize to the driver and to ask for her forgiveness and to thank her for her kindness. She just looked at me and she said, "Well, what else are we going to do?" I think that in our days of hardship and defeat, when the storms and the sufferings come, we can most clearly see that kindness is our only option. But in the midst of the everyday, at the mall and the restaurant, at the child care center or on the highway, or even here at church, I think we imagine that we have a choice. Yet the truth that will not let us go is that the feelings and the experiences of other people matter just as much as our own feelings and experiences. And if we seek to honor and respect those who share this life with us, no matter how irritating or alarming their actions may be, there is only one way to go. And that, my friends, is the way of kindness. May that kindness live in our hearts and be with us this week. Amen.